I'm Jeremy Adams.
I'm Tim Sheridan.
And this is Hops Geeks News.
And you're watching Hops Geek News.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Hops Geek News, your home for comic books, movies, TV shows. But today, we have a special craft beer presentation for you. You know, we love to rep our local craft breweries, the local beer scenes, if you will. And we have a really special guest with us, somebody we met actually early on in the COVID days of Twitter and the pandemic and everything like that, when it was very, just as important as it is today about craft beer and supporting. And he's somebody that is just about hit almost every brewery. Joel Geier will be joining us in just a moment. First things first, if you go to Hops Geek News on any social media platform, any podcasting platform, that's where you can find us. Go ahead, like, subscribe, share, all of that good stuff. Drop us a DM if there's anything you ever want to know, want to ask us, want to hear us do. That's the best way to do it. Tell us we did wrong. That also works too. But because we have such a wonderful guest on today, I broke out the fine where, like I was telling everybody, I'm giving some thanks today with Treehouse Brewing out of my home of Massachusetts. It's the mecca of craft beers on the East Coast for a lot of folks. I figured that was a good beer pool considering we have essentially Beer Jesus with us today is what I'm going to call him. But before we get to Beer Jesus, Lauren.
That's not Greg Koch, isn't he the self-proclaimed Beer Jesus?
Not anymore, brother.
So funny enough, I am actually drinking a beer from Massachusetts as well. I got Trillium.
You got Trillium, yes.
So I do. So I have the Melker Street IPA. It is 7.2%. I wanted to make sure I got a beer from a brewery that is mentioned in the book we're going to be talking about, Flights Across America. And because it's across America, I have it in my I can do this all day glass.
I have it in a Treehouse glass. Actually, I didn't do that on oh, you can't see me. Sorry. Anyways, I didn't mean to do that, but it just happens to work out that way. I have proper glassware today. Yes,
I love it.
It's crazy. I got my Barbarian Brewing sweater on, but let's bring in the man himself. Joel, welcome to the show. I know we've chatted with you a long time ago, man. It's been a hot minute.
We were both on his
podcast. You were both on.
Separately.
We were separately talking about, I think I was talking about the Idaho beer scene back then, and Lauren was talking about Florida. So you had a podcast, but ever since then, man, you've been on some travels. So why don't you go ahead and catch us up as what has gone on and what it is we're talking about today?
Yeah. So, again, Joel Geier, and on social media since, I guess, 2017, I've had the handle Brewery Travels, and that is pretty self-explanatory. I have visited breweries all over the country. I've been to now almost 1,400 across all 50 states.
That's crazy.
I'll be hitting 1,400 next month. And was able to do this primarily through my wife working first as a travel nurse, and then later on, she worked fully remote as a psychiatric nurse practitioner. And during that stint, I was a stay-at-home dad. We are now home in a more permanent fashion with our kids, as my oldest, my daughter, is now in kindergarten. And so, once school kind of rolled around, we decided to settle in. But my wife and I lived in 14 states together before our 9th wedding anniversary across the 4 major time zones. I believe our kids lived in 8 or 9 of those states, I think, with us. So they are 6 and soon to be 4 respectively. And we basically stopped traveling now over a year ago. It's been over a year that we've been home. So, we really squeezed a lot in there. As much as we could, both pre-kids and post-kids. So, we just were able to kind of bounce all around the country. The first stint was pre-COVID. This was back like 2017, 2018. Came home, had the kids. We both finished graduate school, and we missed traveling, and we kind of made the brash, stupid, whatever, however you want to describe it, the crazy decision to go and live on the road with what at that point was a toddler and a newborn baby. My son was, I want to say, was he 3 months old, I think, when we first started living on the road again full time, going and traveling places. Because we would essentially, for people that don't know, we would go, and when it was at first just a travel nursing job, she would get a job, at hospital, and we would go and live there for about 3 months at a time. We'd find temporary housing. And then when she worked fully remote, we would still go and live places for, typically, maybe 2 months or so. And we just had a little more freedom over the timing and length where we were staying. We didn't have to worry about commutes as much. But yeah, so that is what enabled me to do this. Essentially, was that my wife's career gave us the chance to not just go and travel around the country, but when you're living somewhere for months at a time, you can really kind of dive in deeper to all these different local craft beer scenes.
Right. You get more than a taste.
Yeah. And it's not just that too. Like, it's not just the city. It's like you can do the whole region in a lot of ways. Like, for instance, when we lived in Baltimore for 3 months, and that meant I went to everything in Baltimore during the time that we were living there, but we also did weekend trips to Philadelphia and Richmond, DC and Harrisburg and
all right
the
there.
Delaware Eastern Shore. Like, you're able to do all of these other places, because unlike when you're, coming on a vacation, like, you're just coming into a place, you're hitting all the touristy spots, at most you probably have a week, or something. So you're not able to go around all the different places without taking separate trips. So
right. And then if
that
you
was
squeeze
the big
them all
benefit.
in, you're like, oh my God, now I
you're not even getting
weeks.
Exactly. So that was the big thing that kind of propelled me in terms of getting me to this point where I could write a book, Flights Across America, to kind of showcase the craft beer scenes, the craft breweries all around the country. And it's just something that I'm incredibly passionate about and very excited to finally be able to share with people in this type of format.
Well, and I think what's so interesting too is I think of all the breweries I've been to since breweries took off, and I don't think I could name them all. And so what's really cool is you don't just have them all named and listed like numerically. You also took notes on them, which is a great way to, go back and refresh your recollection. Like when I was reading your book and you got to Austin, we did a 4-day Austin beercation. We squeezed a lot in there, but like you mentioned Lazarus Rising. And I was like, oh, I definitely hit up that one. I remember the mural and I remember a brewery down the street, but I don't remember what the one was down the street. I don't remember what I had there because I didn't keep track of any of it. And I think it's like such a cool thing now that you have those memories. So you've hit one in every state, correct?
Yep.
So you got Hawaii and Alaska.
Yep. We did Hawaii and Alaska last year. Yep.
That you've lived in. What I got to know before we dive in, like, what was your, aside from the home state? And I saw you, are you drinking a Spotted Cow?
No, I'm actually drinking Pilsner from New Glarus.
Oh, nice. I have a Moon Man in my.
Moon Man. I mean, I will drink a Spotted Cow if it's given to me, but that's not what I will buy from them if I'm buying.
I saw the can and I was like,
I know. Yeah. It's either like, I love their Pilsner. I love their Kolsch. The raspberry tart is great.
I think I have the raspberry in there.
And two women, like, they're one of my, I love New Glarus, and Spotted Cow is a perfectly solid beer and is what led them to build their empire. But
it's the tailgating beer.
It's
exactly. When you tailgate. It's basically, it's Sam Adams.
Exactly.
What Sam Adams is to, Boston is essentially what, Spotted Cow is to Wisconsin at that
point. You can only buy it in the state of Wisconsin.
You could only that's unlike Sam Adams, who distributes out of Ohio, for example. You can only get that in there.
Right.
So,
well, I made the mistake of telling somebody I thought Spotted Cow was overrated and about lost my head. It was just very hyped up before I tried it.
Yeah. But anyway, Matt, you were asking about favorite.
Yeah, what was your favorite state that you guys have lived in?
For beer or like I
just
would
in
say,
general, like do you have a state that you're like, man, I really
love city, so we lived in Asheville for 3 months. And
Asheville.
We loved Asheville, obviously from a beer perspective. I mean, I also got to live in San Diego, Denver, lived in Seattle. We lived in a lot of places that have incredible beer scenes. The thing that differentiated Asheville for us in a lot of ways was that it was like, it's a smaller city, obviously, it's not a big city, but even in comparison to a lot of these other smaller mid-sized cities, Asheville is so locally based. Like, I think partially because of its location, but also partially because it's just the culture there. When you go to downtown Asheville, it is essentially entirely composed of local businesses and restaurants, brewery, all this stuff. Everything is locally based. There, you can go find, if there's a Walmart, there's some fast food, but like you have to drive to the outskirts of town to go to stuff. There's no big box chain stuff like in the main part of the city. And it's a very close-knit community. And obviously they had, the flooding, the hardships there that were pretty devastating, including a couple breweries that I very, very much love that were completely destroyed.
They'll probably never get, the smaller ones.
Very possible.
Never get to open their doors again compared to the big ones that, had damage. And
I loved
come back.
Yeah. I loved seeing everything Dissolver was doing though. They would seem like a great home.
Dissolver, Burial were doing some good stuff.
I'm a big, I know the guys at Dissolver well. I actually had one of them on my podcast when talking about Asheville, and they're phenomenal, and obviously that community has rallied behind them. But yeah, we just loved Asheville. in a lot of ways. And we also did, we're big fans of the Pacific Northwest. So, Seattle was great. And we also did live in Eugene, Oregon, which isn't, we loved Portland the most in Oregon, but we did not actually live there at any point. But yeah, Seattle was really, really great, except for the traffic. That is, that's one thing that, when we talk about, big city versus small city in Asheville, it doesn't take you, even when there's like bad traffic, it's not going to take you that long to get, if you're going to different breweries, it's not going to take you that long.
No.
Whereas
a few of them you can walk to downtown.
We
walked,
I mean,
like,
the South,
I think from
the
Burial
South
to
Slope,
Dissolver.
Yeah, the South Slope neighborhood between South Slope and downtown, there's something like, I don't know what the current number is after, the flood, but I know at one point there was like 13, 14 breweries that you could conceivably within like 7/10, like less than 3/4 of a mile, you could walk to between all of them.
And we're like looking
crazy.
on Untappd, and it was like my phone had, measles.
Crazy.
It's incredible. It is awesome.
Speaking of Asheville, you actually mentioned that you went to a ginger beer tap room. So is that actual alcoholic ginger beer?
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell us a little bit about that? Because that definitely piqued my curiosity.
Yeah, that's the only time I've ever done that, and I wasn't planning to. But then I had a different friend who visits breweries, and he came down to visit me in Asheville, and his wife wanted to go there, and he went and he told me, he's like, hey, like, you should actually go and, and check this out. Like, it's actually, very unique, very cool, because they're doing a lot of, kind of unique, like different things. Like, it's not just the strictly what you picture when you think of, when you just think, oh, it's just going to be ginger beer. Like, they do a lot more things with adding in different fruits and adding in, all this different stuff. And it felt like a pretty typical brewery tap room, outside of the fact that it was just ginger beer instead of, regular beer. I'm trying to remember here. I can pull up on my spreadsheet what my favorite was from there, because
so I've actually never had a ginger beer. Is it like ginger ale, or is it sweet, or is it more spicy? Like if you're eating
I would say a little more spice. I would say it's a little more spice, depending on, I think there are some that can be a little more, maybe could be a little more on the sweeter side of things. One that I had was it was a cranberry herb cranberry herb ginger beer. So like they were doing a lot of, because like they're more basic. I think like they had their classic ginger beer, and that's where I think you get a little bit more of the ginger kick, like a little more of the spicy ginger when you think of that. But then they had these other kind of offerings that were more complex with their flavors and the different things that they were doing with it. So yeah, it was interesting. Like like I said, I don't go and seek that kind of stuff out, but every now and again, I've been to, a meadery, and I've been like, I do like meaderies, yeah. Like I don't seek those out. I don't choose them over breweries, especially when I'm just visiting somewhere. But if it's there and I've been everywhere else, and I'm just someone like recommends, I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll go check it out. And I've enjoyed getting to do those. I mean, I haven't been disappointed in them. I just, typically, obviously prefer to stick with craft brewery.
Yeah, no, I get that completely. I actually went to my first meadery recently. It was walking distance from 1010 in Ivanhoe. And I walked in and, I told them I don't really know mead. They were so nice. They gave me samples, and they had a collab with Tactical Brewing. That I was like, I didn't even. And so she's like, well, I'll give you a shot of mead and a shot of the beer from Tactical. I'm like, perfect. So yeah, sometimes it's fun to go outside of your comfort zone. But yeah, I did a double take when I was reading that.
Yeah.
So I know you always get asked, I'm sure, what's your favorite brewery. So I definitely don't want to ask you that, especially because that's like picking your favorite child. But I do have to ask if there could be just one place that you could go back to. So you don't have to narrow it down to a specific area. Is there one place if you could just go back for a weekend? Where would you go back?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Well, I mean, there's so many. I would there's a couple places that I need to do a lot more in, for sure. The LA area in general, I've been to a decent amount. I've done more there recently, but the LA area has got a ton of great beer, and I've been putting a little more of a dent in it, but there's still a lot more to be done. Albuquerque's one that I need to. Boise's one that I think we talked about that. I mean, I've only been to the one. I've only stopped through there once. I went to Coeur d'Alene and I went to the breweries up there, but Boise has been one that I would need to revisit. And then New England as a whole, we were talking. So New England was the first place that my wife and I lived during our travels back in 2017. She was working in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and we were living in Hampton.
That's right. Yeah.
we were living in Hampton Beach, right on the coast.
Yep,
And so, you know,
I
we
lived
went to
there
a lot of the
myself,
breweries. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, we went to, you know, we got to visit a lot of those places, but that is now, so that was in the summer of 17 was when we got there.
which is too
So-
funny because we were living there at the same time. Funny
Yeah,
enough.
that's crazy.
That's right. We were there at the same time.
Yeah,
I was there
forgot
until
about
19.
that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Now it's all coming back to me.
Yeah. But I mean, so we're now coming up on 8 years now, all of
And
a sudden since
They've
then.
got a lot
Yeah.
more up there.
And
now,
that is
especially
a
right in
lot- that
Kittery,
is a
Maine,
big-
and yeah.
Yeah, and so like that is the place that I have a long list of names, including Treehouse, because so when we lived there the first time, Treehouse was still they were getting
It was
to be a
only in
big-
Charlton
they were.
still.
Well, it was only there, and at that point there was pretty explicit on the website, like 'cause I even like contacted them and asked them, and it said we cannot guarantee that we will be able to pour beers at any given day, depending on, you know, can release stuff and picking up all that kind of business. And so this was still really early in my travels. I had barely been to 100 breweries. And I was like, well, if they're not gonna be able to pour me beer, like I'm not gonna go. I can't go and buy a whole bunch of like I'm not gonna drive way out of my way because it was
People used to
way
stock
out of
up
my
on
way
like
to go and
pallets
do
of
that.
beer,
Yeah.
and
So-
they would. It was crazy.
Yeah, and so obviously looking back, you know, I wish I would have, because that is, you know, arguably my biggest miss, I guess I could say.
Well, now they
but-
have the Treehouse in Tewksbury, which is 10
Which
minutes.
I
from my-
did. That's the one I did, and it's
Well,
gorgeous.
I
They've
went
got,
there-
like 5 locations. They
Yeah.
got a ton of locations.
Well,
So
it's nice because this one's 10 minutes from my parents' house.
Oh,
So every
so
time I go
convenient.
home, which I'm
Mhm.
going in April, yeah,
What is it?
my
The
dad
sandwich
Yeah.
one's on the ocean, isn't it?
You-
the sandwich one is
one's on the Cape.
that's like
Yeah.
That's
But
one
yeah,
I
so
wanted to
I am
do.
hoping I am planning on getting there either this year or next year, that we're going to go back and do a New England trip, because my kids,
Oh yeah,
they just need to hit the New England states minus Connecticut to get to 50 states.
nobody wants to go to Connecticut anyways.
Yeah. So I am that is one that is, like I said, between me, like just kind of getting into the, like not being fully integrated into the beer scene, and them also still being newer and not being what they are now.
Oh, yeah.
That is what caused me to miss that, you know, 7.5 years ago at this point.
Well, even like
Um,
Trillium opened up a spot in, you know, downtown Boston.
Downtown, yeah, when I was
I
there-
that's the one I went to, the
Trillium-
downtown one.
Yeah.
Trillium is my favorite in Massachusetts that I've been to, and like they were
Same.
all out, they were only out in Canton when I was there.
Yeah.
So you know they make great beer, but yeah, a Bellflower up in Portland, Maine is one, and there's a ton of breweries in New England that I really want to get to, and Rhode Island is one that they are the only state where I've only been to one brewery in. I was
You need
supposed
to
to go
add
to
Gray
more.
Sale to your list.
Yes.
Okay. So, because I know you had mentioned that in the book that you had only done one, and
Yes.
I have family that lives in Rhode Island. So yeah, is it Tilted Barn is fantastic and it's gorgeous. But
So
then Gray
I was
Sale,
supposed to
love
go
their beer.
to 2 others, and we got there, and one of them was closed for, and this was like, again, where I was early, so I wasn't necessarily on top of everything, but one of them ended up being closed for a private event. And
Mhm.
one of them, I talk about in the book about how important it is to look at the hours. Well, we had driven down from Hampton Beach down to Rhode Island that day. And then we got there at like, you know, like I think like 2 p.m. before we were going to head back home. And they didn't open until I think it was like 4 or 5 that day. And we had to drive all the way back
Oh,
home.
yeah.
And so it was like, I'm not going to make my wife sit in the parking lot for, you know, however many hours
Yeah.
before we go back up. So yeah, I was supposed to go to 3 and I ended up at 1. So, and it was funny because when we were walking through downtown Providence, there was one that we saw, and my wife's like, "Oh, hey, do you just want to stop at this one?" I was like, "No, like I kind of picked out, like, you know, I've got the ones that we're going to go to, like, you know, like later." And then of course it didn't work out. So,
Yeah.
you know, lessons learned, you know, like I said early on, you know, it's still,
Hey, that's
learning
how, you know,
everything,
you got to
so-
Well,
fail
it took
and
me-
make
Yeah.
mistakes. So
Yeah, it took me
Yeah.
3 times to get to Tilted Barn. The first time I was up there, Sam
I've never been. And I'm
Caglione
from.
was getting a
Very fair.
speech, and so
Oh.
the brewery was closed. And the second time I was pregnant, so I'm like, "What's the point?"
Yeah.
And then I finally made it the third time. So third time's a charm. But
Yeah.
yeah, Rhode Island, I mean, it's got great beer. And it's funny because we were up there for like my grandmother's funeral. And my dad and I immediately we went
Oh, I
straight from the
remember this
airport's
story, yeah.
proclamation. And then we went to a liquor store. 'Cause you have to buy your beer at like the liquor store. And we instantly found Captain's Daughter. And we both got it and we loved it. And we went back to get more before we flew home. And the guy's like, "Oh no, that flies off the shelves. Like you guys must have just gotten lucky when you got it." So
Oh.
yeah, so we both fell in love with that brewery, so that was great. So I have another question as a Floridian, because you lived in Florida in Ormond
Yep.
Beach,
Mhm.
and obviously you did a lot in Florida. If
Yep.
you ever do Sarasota, though, you got to go to Calusa.
Yes.
But as a Floridian, I'd like to know, for one, which surprised you the most about the beer scene in Florida, and which brewery in Florida surprised you the most? Could be good or bad.
Ooh.
And which brewery was the most cliche Florida brewery?
Ooh. So overall,
I had to come up with questions he hasn't been asked.
yeah,
I'm
no.
just gonna ask
Those
all
are
the
those
No,
are
it's
really
hard.
good. I like that. So Florida as a whole, like, so I really enjoyed our time in Florida. I got to do a lot more than I thought I was going to. When we were first going down there, I did not think that we were going to get down to Southern Florida, all that, like Miami and everything, and we did. Very happy about that. And then, got to do a lot in Tampa, several in Orlando, Jacksonville, kind of all through Central Florida, and obviously most everything kind of along that northeastern coast, which is where we were living there in Ormond Beach, which for people that are listening, if you're not fully, it's Daytona Beach area. Yeah, it's about, a little more than an hour south of Jacksonville ish, give or take.
Yeah.
So yeah, the biggest surprise, I would say, and I know overall my biggest surprise, honestly, was my night in Orlando. Like, and I'm not just saying that because I'm talking to you. Like, I have told people that,
casting her up. All right, you don't have to. Listen,
no,
you can,
well,
you
and
can
I
say
am
the truth. No, I'm just kidding.
This is with the caveat.
Honestly,
though,
Orlando surprises me with their beer scene a lot.
Yeah,
so.
This is with the caveat though that I was very, very crushed that Deadword's closed, because they were my favorite of my visit there, because I'm a big lager guy and their lagers were impeccable. I mean, I think they had won. I think when we were there the year prior, they had won. They had won a medal for one of them, or I think I forget if it was a gold or a silver at GABF.
I think it was a gold.
I think it
bet
was
money on
too.
it, but I think it was a gold. And they were doing the Sati beer with a clay fermenting pot. And Ivanhoe's in there now, but they have the clay fermenting pot as a decor. They said it's just not worth it to brew in there. It's too much of a pain.
Really?
Yeah.
Well. Anyway, so the other one. So we mentioned beforehand that we were talking about that we have matching shirts from Tactical, Lauren.
Yes.
That we have the Jurassic Park themed logo. And they make really good beer. And then they were one of my first stops, and then Deadwoods was my last stop. And in between there, I'd sandwiched Sideward and Hourglass, and they both made really, really good beer. Like, I was like blown away by that night I had in Orlando, because I think I had known, like, Deadwoods was one. I can't say I was surprised by them because I was aware of the GBF winning medal, and so I went there being like, I know I'm getting this beer and I'm probably going to enjoy these other, like, they should be very good.
Right.
But the other places, Sideward in particular, I think I feel like they both ended up having nominees, I think, for one of my best of categories that year. I know Sideward did they had a beer called Make It Dangerous, and it was an English pale ale fermented on ex-bourbon barrel staves. And it was just, it was really, really good. And then Hourglass had a brown ale, which, as a father to young children, the brown beer, what do you see?
Yeah.
Is great. And then they also have, is it a honey IPA?
Oh, the
really
2 million bees.
Yes, that's the one. Yes, that's the one.
A good one. And it's with like local
too.
honey. Yeah.
And they have a really funky little tap room also. So yeah, I mean, they really, I was very impressed with Orlando as a whole. So I guess that would be like my big surprise was those breweries outside of Deadwoods. The most cliche, I would say there's a couple that could be in the running for that, because when you think Florida, you're thinking kind of a combination between like a beachy dive bar, kind of like and so one that has one of the best views I've been to at a brewery is Hollywood Brewing, which is in Hollywood.
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah,
it is on the beach, but that's kind of it. Like,
they have organic food, but the beer
we ate the pizza there and it was good, but and it's like the inside is not, it's not, doesn't feel like your typical tap room.
It feels like a restaurant.
It feels like a pretty with like a dive bar-esque kind of feel to it. And then there was a couple others similar to that up kind of by us. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to look.
Oh, you had the one. It unfortunately closed recently, but was it
Beachside Brew Pub? Yeah, that was in Ormond.
I liked that though.
That
was
really,
literally huge.
It was way bigger than you would realize. Yeah, because that was right down the road from where we were living, because we were living right on the beach. And that one unfortunately did close because it did kind of have that beachy feel.
Yeah, that was definitely
all the
old
clothes.
School Florida.
They had tons of clothes, just like hung up on the ceiling to be able to buy. I would say there was one other one that I have on that I'm trying to remember the name of. Let me see if I can crawl across it. Otherwise, we'll just have to come back to it later.
Oh, no, you're good. You don't have to. I'm just curious also because so many people, when they think Florida beer who aren't aware, think like, oh, they must have like a key lime goza, which there are breweries that have that. And they're, they think like light beachy beers. But then people will come down here and they're shocked at the level of stouts that some of the breweries here produce because they don't.
I feel like we talked about that.
Oh, we probably did
when
I was with the Girls Pineapple.
And I think I made that comment too, because before that, the very first time I went to Florida was to visit my buddy who lived in Jacksonville at the time. And we went to some breweries in Jacksonville, as well as a couple in Tampa, and I think one in Orlando. And I made the comment that I think my 3 favorite beers from that trip were all stouts, which is, again, that's not something you would pick. And here I do have it. It's Coquina Coast Brewing in Flagler Beach.
Okay, I haven't been to that
is
one.
Another super like small, like beachy, very beachy themed brewery.
My grandparents lived in Flagler, actually.
Yeah.
Enough.
Yeah, so I mean, and there's a couple others that would kind of fit that cliche feel, which makes sense, especially if you are a brewery that is in a more touristy area, because you're expecting like people are coming to Florida for the touristy experience, and therefore, a beachy Florida themed brewery is something that they would be drawn to.
Oh, I have been there.
Yeah. Well, not overly memorable, but it is there, and another small little spot, and I thought it was solid, but yeah, that one is not on the beach though, unfortunately, even if the name kind of suggests that.
Right, it's close to the beach, but not on the beach. Yeah, well, we've had times where we've just done little, trips heading to South Florida or to Jacksonville or something, and we're like, well, let's just see what's along the way with food.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been a great thing too, and I do want to say to anybody who's interested in the book, but they're like, do I want to read a beer book? Because some people just don't want to read a beer book, but they love book. This is also a great reference book. Like if you're going on a beercation, if you're planning a trip, like we did a road trip years ago when my son was 6 months and we had a 5-year-old and a 13-year-old. And I very carefully researched the entire 5-week road trip to find breweries that were kid friendly, had food, all of that. And so like I had to do all that from scratch. So having had this to see, like we spent a day in Albuquerque, New Mexico, we spent a day in Houston, like that would have been great to have this as a starting point. So absolutely highly recommend getting the book, whether you are big into beer, a little into beer, getting started into beer.
That was the goal. Yeah, that was kind of the goal of it, was that I obviously do talk about the actual beer, throughout, and then mention favorites and kind of what brews are known for. But I also talk a lot about just the beer scenes in general. And I also love talking about the history of the brewery, the history of the buildings that these breweries kind of take over. A lot of them are.
That was really cool. There were local breweries I didn't even know.
Yeah, I love that kind of stuff.
I just went to one, it's by Fredericksburg. I went there in October and we just happened to see it because we were up there. I was visiting the arm of Stonewall Jackson. Like there's a gravesite for the arm of Stonewall Jackson. I was like, I don't know why, but I need to see this. And we happened to see there was a brewery right nearby. It was 1781 Brewing or something like that, I believe. We go there. It's an old barn. This family owns a winery, and in this brewery's in an old barn. Well, it turns out this is the actual site where they cut off his arm at. And so it's now a brewery, and they have like this memorial out front with this tree, and they have a picture, but inside it's, obviously kept up so things weren't falling apart, but it's the actual location where they cut his arm off when he got shot, and all that kind of stuff, which is just insane to me that now we're sitting there drinking, and they do a bunch of reenactments there. And the lady was talking to us about how it's just funny to see everybody in their Civil War get up, enjoying these beers at this location and things like that. So when you're talking about history, there's breweries on locations that, which are just so cool, because that's half the fun.
Speaking of barns, there's a brewery in Iowa called Beer in the Barn, and it is located. So if you may think, oh, Iowa, they're known for barns and farms. Well, the oldest standing barn in Iowa is home to a brewery. 1861, I believe. It's an old limestone historic. It's like on the state historic site, and it's home to a brewery.
That's cool. When you also go into some of the names, you get the hit, because I always love that.
Yep.
I love hearing the names of, even where they get some of the beers, but like it's funny because 1010 Brewing, they moved into 1010 Virginia and they didn't have a name, so they just named it 1010 Brewing.
Yeah.
But it's always fun to hear. And you even mentioned with Hourglass not being named after the district, which is really funny because a lot of people don't realize that. So to anybody who has not been to Orlando, we have an area called Hourglass District, and Hourglass opened a second brewing location in that area just by chance. So the people think the area is named after the brewery. It is not. And the brewery is not named after the area. either. So
Yeah.
that's
But no, going
hilarious.
back to the point just quick is like the whole purpose with this book though is like I said, there's enough like beer and other like kind of types of nerdy stuff in there that and like the information on the breweries and traveling that will get the most, staunch beer fanatic. It'll be something that they really enjoy and learn from, but it's also something that I really believe can help get the more new, like kind of the newbie, like, craft beer person that maybe is kind of, drinks some craft beer, doesn't really visit breweries, or maybe, has just started drinking beer in general and hasn't really made that jump yet, that it can be kind of that gateway to help them take that next step into taking this to, I'm not telling everyone to do what I do, where, you take a notebook to the brewery every, and are taking these crazy, notes and being super nerdy about it, but just to get them to take that next step towards enjoying craft beer, and not only enjoying craft beer, but enjoying the brewery as a whole and what it all is about. Because again, like that's why I talk about the history of the buildings and the reason behind the names and the people. And because with craft beer, you're going in for a full experience. You're not just buying a case of macro beer and just going on and like that's there's nothing else with that,
Right.
So that is the big point of what I'm trying to make of all these local businesses and kind of the history behind them and what makes each one unique and special.
Awesome. And so before we wrap it up, I just have one last question before you can tell everybody where to find your book do you think you will make another book about the States? And do you think you'll ever go international?
So I could see the possibility in a few years down the road doing an update of some kind. Because I already have, like I mentioned, since I finished publishing the book, I've been to LA and been to a ton of great breweries out there, Everywhere Beer and Green Cheek. And I'm actually, so next month I mentioned I'm hitting 1,400. Well, I'm going to be doing that in Houston, Texas.
Oh, wow.
And Houston, I don't know if I mentioned in the book, the only two, like, I guess I have three kind of major cities that I haven't been to breweries in. It's Houston, Detroit, and Columbus. And Detroit and Columbus are within striking distance. Kind of Detroit's like 6 hours. Columbus is more closer to 7. But Houston was kind of the one that's like way out of the way.
Yeah.
But I am getting there next month, at the end of next month. So, and then again, like I mentioned, between here in the next year or so, I'm planning on getting the whole family back out to New England. So obviously that will be a whole other circle of getting to all these different places. So, and not just talking about new places. Obviously there'll be updates, unfortunately, where I'm having to remove breweries and breweries in the book, because there is a handful of them, including Deadwoods, where I mentioned like, hey, this brewery is closed, but this is what I really loved about them. Well, in 5 years, it may not make as much sense to still have those mentions in there,
right?
Even because it won't be anywhere close to being timely. But yeah, so I mean, I could see that happening for sure. In terms of a completely new book, I mean, I could see it'd be possible. I would have to think longer about that. This was quite the process. And
sure,
it was also
just
something
organizing all of it. Yeah.
Well, but it's something that I've had like the strong idea for it and the plan for it for a long time. So, it was something that came together. The publishing aspect of it is what was difficult more so than the writing was, it took a long time, obviously, but I had, for the most part, kind of planned it out. International. Yes, I will be visiting other countries and going to breweries eventually, especially once the kids get older. We do have plans for that, hopefully, but I would be going there more as a fan. I may have my notebook with, but I also do not even pretend like I will have the chance to become so in depth in those places like I did in the US, where I would feel even remotely. Yeah. Well, and just like, and the sheer depth of it, like, I feel like, I mean, I didn't really want to start writing this book until I'd hit at least 1,000 breweries. And then, the 50 states thing wasn't necessarily something that I thought was going to happen for the book. And then it thankfully did. But even if I hadn't, like, I was still getting to almost every state. And going international, it's obviously much harder to do that unless you go and live there for, a year or two or more. And that is not in our cards at the time being. So, if you follow me on the social media, like the brewery travel stuff, yeah, I'll be posting all about it whenever I do end up doing that. But in terms of a book, no, probably not international at this point.
Makes sense. Well, you've mentioned when we hopped on, where are some upcoming events that people can find you at? And then where on social media can everyone find you at?
Yeah, well, so most of my events coming up are here locally in Milwaukee. I may return. I've done them in Chicago, Madison, out in California, Iowa. I'm going to be doing some of the Twin Cities eventually. But I've got some here at local breweries, including at Sprecher, Ope. I've done them at Lakefront and Supermoon already. I'm doing some at a bookstore here as well. And then you can find my book pretty much anywhere online. Amazon is obviously kind of the go-to place that people will go and buy stuff, but Barnes and Noble also has it. And I know if you just search Flights Across America, there's a whole bunch of websites that have it that I didn't even know would have it.
Nice.
That's cool.
In terms of brick and mortar bookstores, do not expect a national rollout anytime in the near future, at least. I do have it on shelves here around a couple places here in the Milwaukee area that are like more of the local bookstores. So we'll see how that all leads into the future. But for now, that is where we are at. But yeah, I appreciate everyone's support and really have enjoyed getting to share it with folks and hope that they are also enjoying reading it as much as I did writing and putting it together.
It made me want to book a beer vacation.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I'm like, it's been a minute.
My Houston trip is going to be my second ever true beercation. The only reason that I'm going is because United Airlines completely screwed over my family and I on the way back from California. That included canceled flight, more delayed flights, and then hotels, all this kind of business. And then to cap things off at the end, getting home at 10:30 p.m. and the next day, over 24 hours later, and then having them lose my children's car seats.
I had that happen on the way to Disneyland. Lost my son's car seat, and they gave me one that was too big for him.
Yeah.
Like, oh, thanks.
I did get some, and that's why my wife we were debating both, and she's just like, no, like you just go for like the weekend or whatever. And the only other time I've had a true beercation where the sole goal was breweries was when I mentioned in the book going to Austin with my dad. So it's kind of funny that the true beercations were both in Texas, but but I did, I say that, but I also did so many day trips when we were traveling, like to all these places where I was just going to breweries that, I can't,
right. You got the better side of it.
Different situation, but
getting to engage in it. Yeah.
Yeah. So so I'm looking forward to all that.
Heck yeah, man. And hopefully, if you find yourself this side, or I find myself in Green Bay because I'm going to a Packers game or whatnot, we'll have to reach out, connect. I know Lauren's gonna be here in a couple of weeks. That's very short notice, but if there's ever a time you're either in Orlando, coming out east, especially New England, let us know.
100%.
We'd love to get to meet up, man, and share a beer in person. And I know all the books, we're gonna have a bunch of different links. Lauren, I already know, has a ton of links where you can get the book. That's in the show notes. Everybody check it out. And Joel, man, thanks again for hanging out with us. It was so much fun getting to connect, and let's not wait 6 years next time.
I know. Yeah, I know. We got to be quicker this time. And I hope that we both get to enjoy beers with both of you guys in person at some point. That has been one of the biggest blessings of traveling and visiting breweries, is that whether it was through social media or my podcast, all the connections I made in different parts of the country. And I've gotten to drink beers with more of them than what I would have guessed. So, I always tell people that I used to say, don't plan it. But at this point, it very well could happen. So I hope that is the case.
Same. And everybody else, make sure you check out the book, like we said. And man, support your local brewery, especially right now with everything going on. Things are expensive. Go out there, support them. As we've talked about a couple that had closed down, and you can never, visit enough. Just buy merch. If you don't even want to drink, get a shirt. I don't know. Who doesn't love a good hat? All right. You need a good hat for the summer. So buy at least a hat. And we'll see everybody next time. Cheers, everybody.